I should have noticed it sooner. The little things. The details that didn't add up. The way Laura started getting home later than usual, the way she kept her phone close, the way she smelled different. The cologne was the first clue. Not perfume. Not some floral, delicate scent that clung to her skin like before. This was stronger, sharper, undeniably masculine. It wasn't mine. I told myself it was nothing. That maybe she had brushed against someone at work, maybe a coworker had hugged her at a meeting, maybe it had just happened. But the smell kept coming back. Night after night. And once I noticed it, I couldn't unnotice it. That was when the thoughts started. The paranoia. The nagging feeling in my gut that something was wrong. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But the lies were adding up. And so, I started watching. Waiting. Digging. Until, eventually, I found exactly what I was looking for. And I wished I never had. It took 3 weeks before I caught her. Not in the act, not yet, but in the lie. A Friday night. Laura had kissed me goodbye, said she was heading out with her friends for a girls' night. But I had checked her location. I never used to do that. I had never needed to. But now, my trust was a fragile thing, and with one tap on my phone, it shattered completely. She wasn't at a restaurant. She wasn't at a bar. She was at a hotel. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, staring at the address on my screen. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. This was it. Proof. My wife was cheating on me. I didn't know how long I sat there, parked in my driveway, debating what to do next. Should I call her? Act like I didn't know? Wait until she got home and pretend nothing was wrong? Or should I go there? See it for myself? The thought of catching her in the act made my stomach churn, but something inside me needed to. I needed to see it. So I started the car. And I drove to the hotel. The Grand Crest Hotel was one of those places that tried too hard to be fancy. Chandeliers in the lobby, gold trim on the walls, a scent of artificial vanilla hanging in the air. I walked in, keeping my head down, scanning the people moving around me. No sign of Laura. Good. I made my way to the front desk, forcing my voice to stay calm. Hey, I think my wife booked a room here, but I forgot the number. Laura Callahan? The receptionist barely glanced up. Sorry, sir, I can't give out guest information. I exhaled slowly, gripping the counter. Right. Of course. My mistake. I turned, eyes scanning the elevators, the hallways. Then, a familiar laugh. Soft. Playful. Hers. I followed the sound before I could think. Through the lobby. Down the hallway. I didn't see her, but I knew I was getting closer. And then, just as I reached the elevator, a notification popped up on my phone. Laura Callahan has stopped sharing her location with you. My blood ran cold. She knew. She knew I was tracking her. And now, she was covering her tracks. A surge of rage flooded through me. Fine. If she wanted to hide, I'd find her myself. Room 514. That was where she was. I didn't know how I knew. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was blind rage, maybe it was just luck. But as I stood outside the door, my fists clenched, I knew she was inside. And she wasn't alone. I could hear movement. Soft laughter. The murmur of voices. A man's voice. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the handle. And I kicked the door open. The lock broke instantly, the door slamming against the wall. My breath came fast and uneven, my pulse roaring in my ears. Laura was in here. She had to be. But instead, I found him. A man. Sitting on the couch, calm as ever, holding a glass of whiskey in one hand, his gaze already on me as if he had been expecting this. I froze. The air in the room shifted. I had prepared myself for a lot of things. Laura in bed with another man, her panicked face, some pathetic excuse. But not this. The man took a slow sip of his drink. Then, he set the glass down carefully on the table and looked me in the eye. Michael Callahan, he said, his voice smooth and casual, like we were old friends. My stomach twisted. Who the hell are you? He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. My name is Daniel Carter, he said. And I think we need to have a conversation. I clenched my fists. Where is Laura? Daniel exhaled slowly, then tilted his head. That's the thing, he said. Your wife isn't cheating on you. A bitter laugh escaped me. You expect me to believe that? She's been lying for weeks. She's in this damn hotel room, sneaking around, meeting someone. Daniel nodded. She is. I frowned. Something in his tone made my skin prickle. Daniel leaned back. She's been sneaking around, lying to you, disappearing for hours at a time. That's all true. I swallowed hard. Then what's your point? He gave me a slow, knowing smile. My wife has been doing the exact same thing. My stomach twisted. The room suddenly felt smaller. Darker. What are you saying? I whispered. Daniel reached for the whiskey again, taking another sip before meeting my eyes. I'm saying, he murmured, that my wife and your wife have been sleeping with each other. Silence. The words crashed into me, knocking the air from my lungs. No, that didn't make sense. Laura had been cheating on me with a man. A man. Hadn't she? Daniel studied me, his gaze sharp. He could see the realization sinking in. Then he smirked. So tell me, Michael, he said, his voice laced with amusement. What the hell are we supposed to do now? I stared at him, my breath uneven, my mind struggling to catch up. What did you just say? Daniel swirled the whiskey in his glass, watching me like I was an interesting puzzle he had just solved. Your wife and my wife. Laura and Anna. They've been screwing each other behind our backs. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me. That's insane. Is it? He raised an eyebrow. Think about it, Michael. The late nights. The secret meetings. The excuses that never quite made sense. He took a slow sip of his drink before setting the glass down. You came here expecting to catch her in the act, didn't you? But instead of another man, you found me. My throat was dry. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. This is bullshit. Daniel leaned back against the couch, completely at ease. You sure about that? I swallowed hard. No, I wasn't sure. Not anymore. I had walked in here expecting to see Laura tangled up in the sheets with some guy, expecting the kind of betrayal I had prepared myself for. But this wasn't something I had ever considered. Daniel watched me carefully, his smirk widening. I see it now. You're connecting the dots, aren't you? I shook my head. No. There have to be other explanations. Like what? He spread his hands. Tell me, Michael, what kind of innocent reason does your wife have for coming to a hotel on the nights you're home alone? And let me guess, she never wanted to have sex with you when she got back, did she? A sick feeling settled in my stomach. Laura had been distant, cold even, but I had blamed it on stress, on work, on anything but the obvious truth. Daniel nodded like he could see the realization washing over me. Same here. Anna would come home late, smelling like your wife, and act like I didn't exist. At first, I thought it was another man too. But then I started digging. I tracked her movements. And guess what I found? He gestured around the room. This place. And a pattern. I exhaled sharply. A pattern? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Laura and Anna are careful. They don't meet at the same time. They alternate. One night, it's Laura here. The next night, it's Anna. His smirk widened. That way, their husbands never catch on. Until now. The walls felt like they were closing in. I had spent weeks thinking I was the one putting the pieces together, when in reality, I had only been seeing what I expected to see. I had followed the scent of another man on my wife's clothes, when all along, it had been her. My pulse hammered in my ears. How long have you known? Daniel exhaled, rubbing his jaw. A while. But I didn't want to come at her without proof. And I figured if my wife was screwing yours, then your wife had to be lying to you too. I just didn't know when you'd figure it out. He gave me a knowing look. Turns out, tonight was the night. I ran a hand over my face, trying to process. So what now? Daniel chuckled. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I forced myself to think. There were options. We could confront them. Demand answers. Walk away, file for divorce, pretend none of this ever happened. But as I looked at Daniel, sitting there with an almost amused glint in his eyes, I had the unsettling feeling that he wasn't thinking about lawyers or therapists. I swallowed hard. You already have a plan, don't you? Daniel's smirk deepened. Oh, I always have a plan. He leaned forward. Tell me something, Michael. How angry are you? Angry wasn't the right word. I felt hollow. Betrayed. Like I had been living in a reality that wasn't real, a marriage that had never actually existed. And beneath it all, a slow-burning fury was starting to take shape. Daniel nodded, reading my silence. Yeah. That's what I thought. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I have an idea. I tensed. What kind of idea? He tapped his screen, then turned it toward me. A text message was open. 2 words, typed out and ready to send. We know. My breath caught. You're going to tell them? Daniel shrugged. It's not that simple. If we just confront them, they'll cry, they'll lie, they'll try to twist it around. No, Michael. If we're going to do this, we need to do it our way. Something about the way he said it made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I hesitated. And what is our way? Daniel leaned in, his smirk turning sharper. We set a trap. My stomach twisted. A trap? He nodded. We make them think they're getting away with it. We let them believe they still have control. And then, when they least expect it, his eyes darkened. We take everything from them. A part of me recoiled. This wasn't rational thinking. This wasn't how normal people handled betrayal. But another part, the one still reeling from the truth, still aching from the deception, was tempted. Because the truth was, I didn't want to just leave. I wanted Laura to feel this. I wanted her to understand what it was like to have the ground ripped out from under her, to have every carefully crafted lie come crashing down. I wanted her to suffer. Daniel saw the shift in my expression. He sat back, satisfied. So, Michael, he murmured, what do you say? My fingers curled into fists. I took a slow breath. Then I met his gaze. Tell me the plan. Daniel grinned. I thought you'd say that. I leaned forward, my heartbeat steady but my mind racing. The idea of revenge had been just a flicker at first, a brief, petty thought buried beneath the weight of betrayal. But now, sitting across from this man who had been deceived just like I had, that flicker had turned into something else, something real. I wanted this. I wanted them to pay. I exhaled slowly. What's the plan? Daniel took another sip of whiskey, savoring the moment, before setting the glass down with deliberate care. We let them think they're safe, he said. That's the first step. No angry confrontations. No accusations. We go home, pretend nothing has changed, and we wait. I frowned. Wait for what? He smirked. For them to make their next move. My hands clenched. I didn't want to wait. I wanted to do something. I wanted to rip the truth out of Laura and watch her squirm under the weight of her own lies. Daniel saw the hesitation on my face and chuckled. Patience, Michael. If we strike too soon, they'll just deny everything, play the victims. But if we play this right? His eyes darkened. We'll destroy them. His voice sent a shiver through me. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to nod. Okay. And when they do make their next move? Daniel leaned back in his chair. We take control of the game. I didn't sleep that night. By the time I got home, Laura was already in bed, curled up under the blankets like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't spent the night in a hotel room with another man's wife. I stood in the doorway, watching her. The woman I had married. The woman I had trusted. It felt like I was looking at a stranger. She stirred slightly, murmuring something in her sleep. I should have felt something, sadness, grief, anything, but all I felt was cold. I climbed into bed beside her, my body rigid, my mind replaying every detail of Daniel's plan. I would wait. And when the moment was right, I would destroy her. The next day, I played my part. I kissed Laura before work. Asked about her plans for the evening. Smiled at all the right moments. She didn't suspect a thing. I spent the day watching my phone, waiting for Daniel's message. It came around noon. Daniel, she just booked another room. Same hotel. Tonight. I clenched my jaw. Laura wasn't even hesitating. I took a slow breath and typed back. Then let's move to step 2. That night, I parked a block away from the hotel and waited. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, his face unreadable as he scrolled through his phone. Room 608, he said finally. Checked in under her usual alias. I gritted my teeth. I had seen the name before, tucked away in Laura's emails. Leah Adams. A fake identity. A perfect lie. Daniel glanced at me. Still with me? I nodded. He smirked. Good. We got out of the car. The plan was simple. We weren't going to barge in. We weren't going to scream or fight. We were going to make them think they had been caught, make them panic, make them confess before they even realized what was happening. Then we'd take everything. We entered the hotel separately, blending into the crowd. I made my way to the elevators while Daniel spoke to the front desk, pretending to be a concerned husband looking for his wife. We had rehearsed the lines earlier. She's supposed to be here, Daniel was saying, his voice tense but controlled. I just want to make sure she's okay. The receptionist hesitated. Then, finally, she caved. Room 608, she said. She checked in an hour ago. Daniel nodded. Thank you. I was already in the elevator, my pulse hammering. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways. Had prepared myself for every possibility. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Because when I reached the door and knocked, Laura opened it. And she wasn't alone. Anna, Daniel's wife, stood beside her, eyes wide, her face draining of color. Time slowed. They froze. And I watched as their carefully constructed web of lies collapsed. Laura's mouth opened, but no words came out. Anna took a step back, shaking her head. Daniel stepped up beside me, his expression unreadable. For a long, excruciating moment, no one spoke. Then, Laura's voice came, barely a whisper. Oh my God! I exhaled slowly. Yeah. My eyes flickered between them. Oh my God is right. Anna's face twisted in panic. Michael, don't. My voice was cold. Just don't. Laura swallowed hard, glancing at Daniel, then back at me. She wasn't trying to deny it. Because she knew there was no way out. Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. Well, ladies, you got anything you want to say? Silence. The weight of it pressed down on all of us. Laura opened her mouth again, but I didn't want to hear it. I turned to Daniel. Step 3? I asked. He smiled. Step 3, he said. Then, before either of them could react, Daniel stepped into the room, grabbed the hotel phone, and dialed the front desk. This is room 608, he said smoothly. Can you send up security? We just caught our wives having an affair. Anna gasped. What the hell are you doing? Laura's face paled. Michael, please. I crossed my arms, my voice calm. Revenge. Their eyes widened. They weren't scared of us. They were scared of what happens next. Chaos. That's the only word for it. The moment Daniel hung up the phone, Laura lunged for him, trying to snatch the receiver from his hands, her face twisted in pure panic. Are you insane? She hissed. What the hell are you doing? Daniel just smirked and stepped back, keeping the phone out of her reach. "Letting the hotel staff know about your little arrangement." His voice was smooth, almost amused, like he was enjoying every second of this. Anna was already near the door, her fingers shaking as she grabbed her purse. "Michael, please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Let's just talk about this." I let out a sharp breath and leaned against the dresser, arms crossed. "Talk? That's funny. You didn't want to talk when you were sneaking around behind our backs." Laura turned to me, her eyes wide with desperation. "I swear, Michael, it's not what you think." Daniel let out a cold laugh. "Oh, come on, Laura. That's the best you've got. It's not what you think. We caught you. Both of you. And security will be here any minute, so unless you want an audience for this disaster, I'd start thinking of what to say." Laura's face turned ghostly white. I could see the wheels turning in her head, calculating, scrambling for a way out. But there wasn't one. Not this time. A knock at the door sent a ripple of tension through the room. Anna let out a quiet curse, glancing wildly between us. "You didn't actually call them. Tell me you didn't actually call them." Daniel's smirk widened. "Oh, but I did." The knock came again, firmer this time. "Hotel security. Is there a problem in here?" Laura turned to me, her voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. "Michael, don't do this. Please." I swallowed hard. A part of me, the old me, wanted to listen, wanted to believe that there was some explanation that would make this all go away. But that part was dead. She had killed it the moment she started sneaking around, the moment she chose her over us. I walked to the door, grabbed the handle, and pulled it open. 2 hotel security officers stood in the hallway, looking between me and Daniel with cautious expressions. "Sir?" one of them asked. "What's going on here?" Daniel clapped me on the back and sighed dramatically. "Well, gentlemen, my friend and I just found out our wives have been using this hotel for their secret little affair." He gestured toward Laura and Anna, who stood frozen, their faces drained of color. "And let's just say, we thought you should know." One of the officers blinked. "An affair?" Daniel nodded. "Yep. And they've been at this for a while. Booking rooms under fake names, sneaking around, lying to their husbands." His grin widened. "Not exactly great publicity for your hotel, huh?" The officers exchanged a glance, clearly uncomfortable. One of them cleared his throat. "Sir, we're not really in the business of handling personal disputes. But if there was a disturbance, we can." "There's no disturbance," I cut in. "But I do have a question. What's your policy on guests using fake identities?" That got their attention. One of the officers frowned. "Fake identities?" Daniel nodded toward the bedside table, where Laura's purse sat wide open. "Her alias is Leah Adams. Pretty sure that's not legal." Anna let out a panicked breath. "You bastard!" she hissed at Daniel. Laura took a step forward, her voice breaking. "Michael, please don't do this." I tilted my head, looking at her like I was seeing her for the first time. "Do what, Laura? Expose you for what you really are?" The security guards shifted uncomfortably. The last thing they wanted was to get involved in something messy. The older officer sighed. "Sir, if you're saying this woman booked a room under a fake name, we'll have to investigate. But if you and your—" his eyes flicked to Daniel— "friend are simply having a marital dispute, we prefer you handle this privately." Laura's fingers dug into her palms. "Yes, privately," she said quickly. "This doesn't need to be public." Daniel smirked. "Oh, now you care about privacy? Cute." I glanced at the officers. "Fine. We'll handle it. But I suggest you keep an eye on who's checking in under false identities. You wouldn't want your hotel's reputation damaged, would you?" The older officer exhaled, clearly relieved. "Noted." He turned to Laura and Anna. "Ladies, I suggest you leave the premises if there's nothing else. We don't tolerate guests falsifying information." Anna's mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but she snapped it shut. Laura swallowed hard. She looked at me one last time, her eyes pleading, searching for any sign of the man who once would have fought for her. But that man was gone. I stepped aside and gestured toward the door. Get out. Laura let out a shuddering breath. Then, slowly, she grabbed her purse and walked past me, her shoulders rigid. Anna followed, her gaze darting between me and Daniel before hurrying after her. The door clicked shut behind them. Silence filled the room. Daniel let out a breath and collapsed onto the couch, shaking his head. Well, he muttered. That was satisfying. I ran a hand down my face, suddenly exhausted. It's over. Daniel snorted. Oh, Michael. He leaned back, stretching his arms behind his head. This is far from over. I frowned. What are you talking about? Daniel's smirk returned, but this time, there was something dangerous in his eyes. They got away easy tonight. But trust me, they're not off the hook. My stomach twisted. You still want more? Daniel shrugged. I don't like loose ends. And our wives? They're not the kind of people who just fade into the background. They'll try to turn this around on us. Spin a different story. Make themselves the victims. He exhaled, sitting up. And I don't plan on letting that happen. A deep unease settled in my chest. I had wanted revenge, and I got it. Laura and Anna had been humiliated, exposed, thrown out like garbage. But Daniel, he wasn't done. I didn't know whether to be relieved or afraid. I met his gaze. What exactly are you planning? Daniel smirked. Let's just say, we're gonna make sure they regret ever playing us. I swallowed hard. I wasn't sure if I was on the path to justice. Or if I had just aligned myself with something much darker. I should have walked away. Laura and Anna were gone. Humiliated. Exposed. I had what I wanted. I had watched my wife crumble under the weight of her own deception, had seen the look of horror on her face when she realized she wasn't the smartest person in the room anymore. That should have been enough. But as I sat in that hotel room, Daniel grinning like a man who wasn't finished playing the game, I felt something I hadn't expected. Satisfaction. It wasn't just the revenge. It was the power. For weeks, I had felt like a fool. Like I was a step behind, grasping at straws while Laura made me feel like I was losing my mind. But now, I was ahead. And I wasn't sure I wanted to go back. Daniel poured himself another drink. You know, Michael, he said casually, swirling the liquid in his glass, I like you. I exhaled sharply. Yeah? That's supposed to make me feel special? He chuckled. What I mean is, I didn't expect you to be this adaptable. He leaned forward, studying me. Most guys? They find out their wife is cheating, they cry, they drink, they grovel. You played the game. And I respect that. I clenched my jaw. I didn't play a game, Daniel. I got justice. His smirk deepened. Did you? I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He took a slow sip of his drink, then leaned back in his chair. Laura's not done. Neither is Anna. You think they're just gonna disappear, never try to turn this around on us? He shook his head. No, Michael. They're liars. Manipulators. Women like them? They don't just lose and accept it. They find a new angle. A cold weight settled in my chest. I wanted to believe that wasn't true. That Laura had already been beaten. But deep down, I knew Daniel was right. Laura had spent weeks lying to my face. Twisting the truth, covering her tracks, making me doubt my own instincts. If I thought she was just going to vanish quietly into the night, I was a damn fool. Daniel saw the understanding hit me. He nodded. Yeah. Now you're getting it. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my jaw. So what do we do? Daniel grinned. Now you're speaking my language. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. First, we watch. 2 days passed. I didn't reach out to Laura. I didn't ask her where she had gone after we humiliated her in that hotel room. I didn't need to. Because Daniel was right. Laura and Anna weren't disappearing. They were regrouping. Daniel had tapped into Anna's social media. She won't post anything obvious, he had said. But she'll slip up eventually. And she did. It was subtle, just a vague post about men playing victim. But it was enough. I knew exactly what was happening. They weren't licking their wounds. They were rewriting the story. I clenched my fists, my phone burning in my hands. They're turning it around. Daniel smirked. Told you. We were still sitting in that hotel room, 2 days after everything had blown up, as if it had become our war room. Daniel poured another drink. So now we make our move. I exhaled. What are you thinking? He grinned. We make them really suffer. My stomach twisted. Revenge had felt good in the moment. But now, I wasn't sure what we were stepping into. Michael, Daniel said, his voice lower, serious now. Let me ask you something. I looked at him. Are you really going to let them win? The question sent a rush of anger through me. No. I wasn't. I sat forward. What's the plan? Daniel's grin widened. Now we take everything from them. It started with Laura's job. Daniel had connections. He wasn't just some bitter husband, he had resources. People who owed him favors. It took him less than 24 hours to get into Laura's professional life. She worked in PR, reputation was everything. So Daniel made sure she lost it. A carefully placed email. A rumor. A whisper to the right people. By the next morning, Laura had been pulled into a meeting with HR. And I knew, the moment she found out who was behind it. Because my phone rang. I stared at the screen. Laura. I let it go to voicemail. Daniel chuckled when he saw my expression. She's panicking. I exhaled, running a hand over my face. This is a lot. His smile faded slightly. You having second thoughts? I hesitated. Was I? Laura had betrayed me. Lied to me. Made me question my own reality. And now, when the tables had turned, I was supposed to feel bad? I clenched my jaw. No. Daniel nodded. Good. He tapped on his phone, sending a message to another one of his contacts. This is just the beginning. By the end of the day, Anna had lost her job, too. Daniel had made sure of it. Laura called me again. This time, I picked up. Michael, what the hell is happening? Her voice was sharp, frantic. I exhaled slowly. Reaping what you sowed. She let out a shaky breath. You're doing this? I didn't answer. Silence stretched between us. Then, softly, she whispered, Who the hell have you become? The question should have hurt. It didn't. I hung up. Daniel was watching me, his smirk returning. Feels good, doesn't it? I didn't answer. Because he was right. It did. Laura didn't call again. Neither did Anna. For the first time since this all started, they had gone silent. I didn't know if it was because they were too busy scrambling to pick up the pieces of their lives or if they had finally accepted that the game was over. Either way, I didn't care. Daniel, on the other hand, was more amused than ever. He sat across from me at the hotel bar, nursing a whiskey, watching me the way a coach watches a promising player. You handled that well, he said. Didn't even flinch when she tried to guilt-trip you. I took a sip of my drink, letting the burn settle in my chest. She didn't deserve a response. That's the spirit. Daniel leaned back in his chair, stretching. You're learning fast, Michael. Something about the way he said it made me pause. I wasn't sure what I was learning, exactly. How to win? How to play the game better than the liars who had fooled me? Or was it something darker? A part of me didn't want to know. I exhaled, setting my glass down. What now? Daniel tilted his head, as if considering. That depends. On what? On how far you want to go. I frowned. We already ruined their jobs. Their reputations. What else is there? Daniel smirked. Oh, Michael. Come on. Think bigger. A cold weight settled in my stomach. You want more. I always want more, he said simply. That was the moment I realized Daniel and I weren't the same. I had wanted justice. Revenge. I had wanted Laura to suffer, yes, but I had also wanted to end this. Daniel? He wasn't in this for closure. He was in it for the thrill. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. What exactly are you planning? Daniel's smile didn't falter. That depends on you. I exhaled sharply. I think we've done enough. His smirk faded slightly. Is that right? I met his gaze. We won. They lost. That's enough for me. Daniel studied me for a long moment. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. I guess we're different men after all. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt something else, something unsettling. I had been following Daniel's lead for so long that I hadn't noticed when the line had blurred. But now I saw it clearly. I wasn't like him. I couldn't be. I stood up, tossing a few bills onto the table. I'm done, Daniel. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked entertained. You sure about that? Yeah, I said, turning to leave. His voice followed me. Then I guess I'll have to finish this myself. I didn't stop walking. I didn't look back. And for the first time in weeks, I thought maybe, just maybe, I was free. I went home that night expecting silence. But Laura was waiting for me. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red-rimmed, her posture tense. It was the first time we had been alone since the hotel. I closed the door behind me, letting the weight of the moment settle between us. You look like hell, I muttered. She let out a hollow laugh. Yeah, well, losing everything will do that to you. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. What do you want, Laura? She swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the table. I need to know something, Michael. I waited. She met my eyes. Was it you? I didn't blink. Was what me? She let out a shaky breath. The job. The rumors. The everything. I tilted my head. Would it change anything if I said no? She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. No. Because I know the answer already. Silence stretched between us. Then she laughed again, but it was bitter. You really did it, didn't you? You destroyed me. I didn't flinch. No, Laura. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you felt it. She looked down at her hands, her shoulders rising and falling with each uneven breath. Finally, she whispered, I never wanted this. Something inside me cracked. Because I believed her. Not about the affair, no, that was real. But the consequences. The full weight of what she had done. She had thought she could live her double life, get away with it, never pay the price. She had been wrong. I pushed off the counter. I guess that makes two of us. I walked past her, heading for the stairs. But before I could leave, she spoke again. Daniel's not done, is he? I froze. Her voice was quieter now. I saw his post. He's not stopping, Michael. A chill ran down my spine. I turned back to her. What are you talking about? She swallowed hard, pulling out her phone and sliding it across the table. I picked it up and read the screen. It was a message board post. Anonymous. But I knew it was Daniel. Some people don't learn their lesson. Maybe it's time they lost more than just their jobs. Maybe it's time they lost everything. My stomach twisted. Daniel wasn't done. And now, I wasn't sure if I had ever been in control. I set the phone down slowly. When did he post this? An hour ago, Laura whispered. Michael, I know I screwed up. I know I don't deserve your help. But I think he's going to hurt me. I clenched my jaw. Daniel had been right about one thing. Laura wasn't the type to disappear quietly. She would fight back eventually. And Daniel? He didn't like loose ends. I ran a hand over my face, my pulse hammering. I'll handle it, I muttered. Laura let out a shaky breath. How? I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure yet. But one thing was certain. Daniel thought I was still on his side. And that meant I had one last chance to stop him. Before he went too far. Before someone got really hurt. Before I lost myself completely. I barely slept that night. I kept staring at Laura's phone, rereading Daniel's message over and over again, feeling the weight of it settle deep into my bones. He wasn't bluffing. I had seen it in his eyes when I told him I was done. He wasn't just out for revenge anymore. This had become something else, something darker. And I had let it happen. I had followed his lead, let him push me further and further down this path, and now I was standing at the edge of something I didn't want to cross. But Daniel would. And if I didn't stop him, I had no doubt he would take Laura and Anna all the way down. I got out of bed before the sun came up. Laura was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table, her arms wrapped around herself. She looked small, fragile, a shadow of the woman I had once loved. I hated that she had done this to me, to us, but I also hated the idea of Daniel deciding her fate. She looked up when I entered the room. "Are you going to him?" I nodded. "I have to." Her grip tightened around her arms. "Michael, he's not your friend." I exhaled sharply. "I know. And if you try to stop him?" She hesitated. "What if he turns on you?" I hadn't let myself think about that. Because it was a very real possibility. Daniel liked control. He liked winning. And if he thought I was standing in his way, I wasn't sure what he would do. But I knew one thing. I wasn't letting him decide how this ended. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Laura's voice stopped me. "Michael!" I turned. She swallowed hard, her expression unreadable. "Be careful." For the first time in weeks, she wasn't lying to me. I nodded once, then walked out. I met Daniel at a bar on the other side of town. It was nearly empty, just a few tired drunks and a bartender who barely looked up when I walked in. Daniel was already there, sitting in a booth, a whiskey in front of him. He looked up when he saw me, grinning like he had been expecting me. "Knew you couldn't stay away," he said. I slid into the seat across from him, keeping my expression neutral. "We need to talk." His smirk widened. "About what?" I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. "I saw your post." Daniel chuckled, taking a slow sip of his drink. "And?" I leaned forward. "You need to back off, Daniel." His smile faltered slightly. Then he let out a quiet laugh. "Back off? Back off? Michael, buddy, we're just getting started." I clenched my jaw. "We got what we wanted. We exposed them. Took their jobs. They're already suffering." Daniel's eyes darkened. "Not enough." I exhaled slowly. "This isn't revenge anymore. This is something else." He tilted his head, studying me. "And what exactly do you think this is?" I hesitated. "Punishment." Daniel's smile returned, but there was no amusement in it now. "You say that like it's a bad thing." I stared at him. "It is a bad thing." He shrugged. "Maybe for them. But not for us." I ran a hand down my face, frustration bubbling beneath my skin. "What do you want, Daniel? What's the endgame?" He leaned back, stretching lazily. "The endgame, Michael, is ruin. They didn't just cheat on us. They played us. Lied to us. Humiliated us. And you think they deserve to just walk away?" He scoffed. "No. They need to lose everything. And when they do, then it's over." I exhaled sharply. "You're out of your mind." Daniel's smirk vanished. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw it, the real Daniel. He wasn't just angry. He wasn't just hurt. He enjoyed this. This wasn't about justice anymore. It was about control. About power. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. Laura had been right. Daniel wasn't my ally. He was the real threat. I swallowed hard. "I'm out." Daniel arched an eyebrow. "Come again?" I straightened. I said I'm out? I don't want any part of this anymore. Silence stretched between us. Then, slowly, Daniel set his glass down and let out a quiet sigh. That's disappointing, Michael. Really disappointing. My pulse quickened. Daniel wasn't the type of man who let things go. I had been useful to him. An ally. Someone to share his twisted little war with. But now, I was in the way. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Tell me something, he murmured. Did Laura put you up to this? I forced myself to stay calm. She has nothing to do with this. Daniel nodded slowly, tapping his fingers against the table. I see. He tilted his head slightly. You sure about that? I stiffened. Because I knew what he was doing. He was testing me. Seeing if I would break. I held his gaze. Yeah. I'm sure. A long pause. Then Daniel sighed and leaned back. All right. I frowned. All right? He grinned. If you're out, you're out. No hard feelings. Everything in me screamed that he was lying. But I nodded anyway. Good. Daniel lifted his glass in a mock toast. To moving on, then. I hesitated, then stood. Take care, Daniel. He smirked. You too, Michael. I turned and walked out, my pulse thundering in my ears. I didn't believe him for a second. Daniel wasn't done. Not even close. And now? I wasn't sure if I had just walked away. Or if I had just painted a target on my back. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car, hands gripping the wheel, staring at the empty street ahead of me. My mind kept replaying my conversation with Daniel, dissecting every word, every smirk, every pause. He let me walk away too easily. No arguments. No threats. Just a smile and no hard feelings. It was a lie. I could feel it in my bones. Daniel wasn't done. And if I didn't do something first, he was going to make sure that neither Laura nor I walked away from this in one piece. I took a slow breath, pulled out my phone, and made a call. Laura answered on the first ring. Michael? Pack a bag, I said. Now. She hesitated. What? Why? I exhaled sharply. Because Daniel's coming for us. When I got home, Laura was waiting by the door, a small suitcase at her feet. Her face was pale, her fingers trembling slightly as she clutched the handle. Where are we going? I grabbed my own bag from the hall closet, barely looking at her. Somewhere safe. She swallowed hard. You really think he's going to? Yes. I zipped up my bag and slung it over my shoulder. You don't know him like I do. He doesn't just stop. He enjoys this. And right now, we're the only loose ends in his story. Laura exhaled shakily. So what do we do? I met her eyes. We take him down first. She frowned. How? I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my messages, and tapped on one. The recording. The one I had secretly started back at the bar when Daniel had practically confessed to his plan. I held it up. This is how. Laura's eyes widened. You recorded him? I nodded. Every word. Enough to prove he's the one pulling the strings. Enough to show he's dangerous. I hesitated. Enough to send him away for a long time. She let out a shaky breath. Michael, if you do this, he'll know it was you. I clenched my jaw. He already knows. And I was done waiting for him to make his next move. We drove through the night, checking into a motel 2 towns over. I sent the recording to 3 people, an old friend in law enforcement, a lawyer, and an anonymous tip to a journalist I trusted. By morning, Daniel Carter's name was everywhere. The message board post. The manipulations. The threats. Everything he had done to Laura and Anna. Everything he had planned to do next. All of it. Exposed. And Daniel? He wasn't laughing anymore. The call came at noon. Block number. I answered. A long silence. Then, Daniel's voice, quieter than I'd ever heard it. You made a mistake, Michael. I didn't flinch. No. You did. A slow exhale. You think this ends here? I tightened my grip on the phone. Yeah, Daniel. I do. Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, he chuckled. Not amused. Not angry. Just empty. You had potential. He murmured. That's what disappoints me the most. I clenched my jaw. Goodbye, Daniel. I hung up. I didn't hear from him again. But I knew wherever he was watching. Waiting. Plotting. And I had no doubt that someday, somewhere, he'd make his next move. But this time, I'd be ready.